I am Ralph Carter. Fortunately for me in my life, I had the opportunity to work on a television series entitled Good Times.
Have you ever thought of Ralph Carter, the boy Michael Evans in Good Times, the Broadway prodigy who once captivated all of America? A bright face, a clear voice, a teenage icon, and then suddenly vanished. No new films, no stage, only lingering shadowy rumors. People whispered he hid a terrible secret. That secret had nothing to do with glory, not awards, not the usual Hollywood scandals. It touched the deepest core, sexuality identity, the truth he once tried to hide. Behind the gentle smile of that boy from years ago lay a gay secret the public called the darkest of all. So what is the truth? Did Ralph Carter really conceal an earth-shattering secret for decades? Or was it all just a vicious rumor? Are you ready to face this shock? Ralph Carter and the darkness behind the smile. The stage lights once shone on the innocent face of little Michael Evans in Good Times. Ralph Carter, born in 1961 in New York, was barely a teenager when he became a Broadway prodigy, winning the Drama Desk Award in 1973, the Theatre World Award in 1974, and even earning a Tony Award nomination. A rarity for a young black teen. He appeared on television, released the album Young and in Love in 1975, and became a teen idol. A rising star who seemed destined to reach the peak of Hollywood. Yet when the lights dimmed, whispers began to spread. Whispers that had nothing to do with music or acting. They pointed straight into his private life, piercing into what the public called his darkest secret, Ralph Carter's true sexuality. In the 1980s, as Carter nearly vanished from television after Good Times ended, rumors began to seep out. Ralph Carter was gay. For America at that time, when the LGBTQ+ community was still forced to live in the shadows under heavy stigma, such a rumor wasn't just a tabloid footnote. It was a real shock to the public. Carter's image had been built so differently, a well-behaved boy, a pure voice, a symbol of the hard-working, loving black family on the sitcom. When the rumor broke, many loyal fans were stunned, some even outraged, unable to reconcile Michael Evans on screen with the whispers off screen. The shock was even greater because Ralph Carter did not deny it. His silence became a void, and instead of waiting for the truth, the public filled it with imagination. People wrote blogs, whispered on forums, tabloids, ran headlines, and exposing the secret videos popped up. In a world of half-true, half-false news, Carter's silence became accidental proof. If it isn't true, why won't he say anything, people asked. And so the rumor spread even further. The truth was, Ralph Carter never had the habit of facing the press, nor did he use social media to set the record straight like artists do today. He chose to retreat into his private life, marrying Lisa Parks in 1987 and having two sons, Michael born 1988 and James born 1989. After their split, Carter remarried River York in late 1994 and had three more children, Phoenix 1995, Jessica 1997, and Vivica 1999. A man with two marriages and 5 children hardly matched the narrative of a closeted gay that the public constructed. But ordinary details of family life rarely interest the masses. They are drawn instead to mystery and drama. And Carter, through his silence, became the perfect target for malicious theories. For a star who once appeared on Soul Train, released charting R&B songs, and enchanted millions, as Michael Evans, such rumors were like a cold cut. They were baseless. No evidence, no witnesses, no admission. Yet they fueled generations of doubt, especially when paired with other rumors in the 1990s that Carter had HIV AIDS. The story of his sexuality was dramatized, further retold like a familiar Hollywood tragedy. A teenage star dazzling in the spotlight, then vanishing, swallowed by darkness. But the difference here is there was never any proof. Ralph Carter has never publicly identified as gay. On the contrary, according to many biographies and accounts from co-star Bernadette Stanis, who played Thelma in Good Times, Carter was not gay, nor did he have AIDS as tabloids once claimed. His family and friends repeatedly affirmed that these tales were nothing more than products of imagination and the cruelty of fake news. Yet once the public is caught in a mystery, few bother to fact-check. They prefer sensational headlines to the simple truth. Ralph Carter was merely an artist who chose to step away from the spotlight to live a normal life. And in that gap, the dark secrets were fabricated, passed down as part of his supposed mystery. So what shocked the public? It wasn't just because Ralph Carter had once been a Broadway prodigy, a Tony nominee at age 13, or a positive black family icon in Good Times. The shock lay in how starkly the image clashed with the rumors. From a wholesome role model to a hidden gay secret, the fall was too steep for audiences of the 1980s and 1990s to easily accept, especially in a society still burdened with prejudice. Labeling a young black teen star as gay was not just scandalous, but potentially career-ending. Yet Carter chose not to speak. His silence stretched on for decades, becoming part of his mystery. No one knew if it was indifference, pride, or simply a refusal to let his life be dictated by gossip. But clearly that very silence turned the question of his sexuality into the most shocking secret of his life. One the public treated as fact, even though it was never confirmed. And therein lies the paradox. Ralph Carter, once an actor who brought joy, laughter, and pride to black audiences, became a victim of baseless rumor. He is remembered not only for his talent, but also for a secret that never existed. A secret born from silence, inflated into a collective shock, and lingering as an unanswered question for decades. Was Ralph Carter really hiding a dark gay secret, or was it all just a phantom shadow conjured by curiosity and prejudice? The storm of public opinion and the unexpected reaction, rumors were just the spark, but public opinion was the wind that fanned the flames. When whispers about Ralph Carter began to spread, the public did not remain silent. They reacted. They debated, they divided into sides, and that very dynamic turned the sexuality secret into a heated topic for decades. In fan forums of the 1990s and later in the 2000s, when the internet expanded, Ralph Carter's name constantly appeared alongside heavy terms: gay secret, HIV rumors, hidden life. The matter evolved into a kind of urban legend, each person retelling a version, adding details, enlarging the shadow around Ralph Carter. Tabloid entertainment blogs did not miss the chance. They posted sensational headlines like "Good Times star hiding the truth about his life," or "Michael Evans and the darkness no one expected." What drew the public in was not just the rumor itself, but the contrast. On screen, Ralph Carter embodied the ideal teenager, a righteous voice of the young black generation. In real life, his silence unintentionally created ambiguity, making people feel something isn't right. When faced with an information void, people often choose to fill it with speculation. And speculation is always more enticing than a simple truth. Reactions split into two clear extremes. On one side, especially within the LGBTQ+ community, Carter was seen as a silent icon, a star forced to live discreetly in an era full of prejudice. They expressed sympathy if he truly was gay, that silence was proof of the fear and crushing pressure of Hollywood in the 1970s-80s. But on the other side, some viewers treated the rumor as a betrayal. They felt their childhood idol had been tainted, shifting from admiration to suspicion. When social media began to spread in the 2000s, the story flared up once more. YouTube videos and "Where Are They Now" segments relentlessly dug into Ralph Carter's life. Each headline was like a dagger. Dark secret revealed gay rumors. True. This wave of exposure not only fueled curiosity, but also kept the secret shadow alive across generations of audiences. What made it more striking was Ralph Carter's unwavering choice of silence. He never posted denials, never held press conferences, never gave interviews about the matter. For many, that was a sign of guilt. For others, it was an act of strength, a refusal to let his life be manipulated by malicious rumors. The result was that public opinion never reached consensus. Ralph Carter became a two-faced symbol: on one side, the bright childhood memory of good times; on the other, the shadow of an unconfirmed rumor. The story did not stop at shocking the public. It generated a storm of controversy lasting decades. And within that storm, Ralph Carter, though he never said a word, remained bound to the phrase "shocking sexuality secret," as if it were an inseparable part of his cultural legacy. The rumor of Carter contracting HIV AIDS in the 1990s. If the story of sexuality had already stunned the public, then the other rumors surrounding Ralph Carter only made the picture of him darker. They were like overlapping shadows, half real and half imagined, creating a thick fog that concealed the truth. One of the cruelest rumors was that Carter had contracted HIV AIDS in the 1990s. At a time when the AIDS epidemic was spreading global fear, attaching a disease stigma to a former teen star was almost the same as a social death sentence. Some tabloids even ran headlines claiming he was wasting away in a hospice or on the brink of death from AIDS. The rumor quickly spread, leading many to believe that Ralph Carter, the once adorable Michael, had quietly passed away. The reality, however, was completely different. Carter was still healthy and even appeared at a few Good Times cast reunion events in the early 2000s. But once doubt is planted in public opinion, it is difficult to uproot. At the same time, another theory began circulating. Carter's career had been frozen due to behind-the-scenes conflicts in Hollywood. People speculated that he clashed with the Good Times production team, was blacklisted by the network, or was simply pushed out for speaking his mind. These stories sounded dramatic, fitting the tragic arc of many other child stars. But in reality, there was no documentation or credible evidence that Carter had ever been punished by Hollywood. His stalled career had more to do with circumstances he grew up too quickly. His defining role was tied to childhood, and as he matured, there were no new roles strong enough to replace it. And so his disappearance from the spotlight only fueled more imagination about his private life. He rarely appeared, rarely gave interviews, and never revealed everyday images. To the public, this looked like a sign that something was wrong. People speculated he lived in seclusion because he carried a secret or because he wanted to hide some personal tragedy. Yet when the truth emerged, it turned out he had simply chosen a quiet life in New York, raising his children, staying connected to local theater, and participating in community arts activities. The paradox was that this very normalcy was treated by the public as abnormal, and from there, baseless tidbits, AIDS, a frozen career, a reclusive life, were inflated into evidence for sensational tales. Ralph Carter, though he did nothing wrong, still became the central figure in a drama written by public opinion. The question is, when an artist chooses silence and steps away from the spotlight, does the public always feel the need to create a mystery to keep them alive in collective memory? In Ralph Carter's case, the answer seems to be yes. Dark rumors ensured his name never completely disappeared, even though they never reflected the truth. Yet the rumors were only the dark epilogue. To understand why the public so easily believed and embroidered those stories, we must return to the very beginning. For only by looking back at his childhood and his rise as a stage phenomenon can we see the paradox. It was the dazzling light of the past that planted the seeds for today's shadows. And from here, the story of Ralph Carter begins. A simple boy from New York, who rose early to the heights of Broadway, and then became a teenage icon of America. From a New York neighborhood boy to a Broadway prodigy, New York in the early 1960s, a bustling city with the dazzling lights of Broadway, was also where Ralph Carter was born. Born on May 30th, 1961, the young black boy grew up in a time of great social upheaval in America. The civil rights movement was rising, and African Americans were beginning to make strong inroads into culture and the arts. Few could have guessed that from an ordinary child in that crowded city, Ralph Carter would step onto the Broadway stage before the age of 10 and quickly become a phenomenon. From an early age, Carter showed a gift for singing and acting. At community gatherings, people noticed his clear voice and natural way of embodying a role. For his family, it was simply a charming trait of their child. But for artistic scouts, it was a rare spark. And so in 1971, at just 10 years old, Carter landed his first role in the musical The Me Nobody Knows. It wasn't a major role, but it was the ticket that opened the door to Broadway, a stage not every child actor could reach. But the true turning point came in 1973, when Carter was cast in the musical Raisin, the stage adaptation of the classic A Raisin in the Sun. Carter was only 12 at the time. He played Travis Younger, a child in a poor black family in Chicago, yearning for a better life. The role seemed tailor-made for him. With innocence and sincerity, Carter touched the hearts of audiences. Critics praised him, the press lauded him, and Ralph Carter went from an unknown child actor to the Broadway prodigy. Within just a year, Carter received prestigious accolades. In 1973, he won the Drama Desk Award for Most Promising Performer. In 1974, he earned the Theatre World Award, recognizing the most outstanding new faces on Broadway. Most notably, Carter was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor, an extraordinary achievement for a boy not yet 13. In the history of American theater, few teens had ever been nominated for a Tony so early. His career blossomed like summer fireworks. The New York press lavished praise, calling Carter Broadway's brightest teen face. With his modest height, charming looks, and emotionally rich voice, Carter became the focus of countless articles. One paper wrote, "Ralph Carter brings to Raisin an energy that sends audiences out of their seats while their hearts remain suspended on stage." What made Carter stand out was not just his acting, but also his singing. Even in Raisin, he displayed a strong voice with refined phrasing. Producers quickly recognized his potential as a singer. He was invited to perform at many shows and events, from Broadway stages to community gatherings. That voice, combined with his teen star glow, made Carter a strong candidate for a music career alongside acting. In the early 1970s, Broadway and American television were hungry for fresh images of young black stars. Carter came as an answer. He was both symbolic and genuinely talented. Not long after Ralph Carter caught the attention of sitcom mogul Norman Lear. Lear, who had created legendary series such as All in the Family, and Maude, wanted to bring the life of a working-class black family to television. And in that picture, he needed a smart, energetic boy to bring new vitality. Carter was the perfect fit. That was when Good Times came into play. In 1974, Lear bought out Carter's Broadway contract to bring him to television. From the bright lights of Broadway, Carter suddenly stepped into millions of American living rooms as Michael Evans. It was a spectacular transition from a teenage stage actor to a national television star. And from that moment, the boy who once wandered the streets of New York became the childhood icon of the entire nation. Looking back on Carter's youth, the striking part was not just the numbers, winning the Drama Desk Award at 12, receiving a Tony nomination at 13, becoming a sitcom star at 14, but how naturally he carried the weight of being a symbol. While many child stars were overwhelmed by the spotlight, Carter walked with confidence, as if destiny had already written his path. And this journey planted the seeds of legend, from a neighborhood boy in New York to the voice of young black America in the 1970s. But every light casts a shadow, and it was that dazzling childhood, that glorious beginning, that placed an invisible burden on Carter: the enormous expectations of the public. Once people grew accustomed to seeing him as a prodigy, any silence or setback later on could easily become an excuse for malicious rumors. Ralph Carter's childhood and early career proved the extraordinary capacity of a young talent, but at the same time they laid the groundwork for later tragedy. A boy who had stood atop Broadway at 13, hailed as television's brightest star, would eventually become the central figure of sensational stories about sexuality, illness, and secrets. To understand why the public so readily believed in those dark secrets, one must return to the origin. Because Carter had once shone too brightly too soon, the public could never accept that such a star could simply fade away quietly. And from those golden childhood memories, the tragic journey began. The peak of fame with Good Times. In 1974, sitcom mogul Norman Lear saw in Carter a unique energy, innocent yet intelligent, with a strange magnetism for audiences. He did not hesitate to buy out the Broadway contract of the 13-year-old boy to bring him onto television in a new series called Good Times. As Michael Evans, the youngest son of a family living in a Chicago housing project, Carter portrayed a smart, strong-willed black teenager ready to debate politics and social justice. The contrast between his youthful appearance and mature voice made the character Militant Midget Michael's nickname quickly memorable to viewers. Throughout its 6 seasons from 1974 to 1979, Good Times became a cultural phenomenon. Millions of Americans followed the Evans family's journey each week, and Michael, brought to life by Carter's natural acting, was always a highlight. Carter didn't just act. He lived the role: the bright eyes when speaking of justice, the firmness in debates with adults blended with the innocence of a true teenager. That appeal quickly turned Ralph Carter into a teen idol. Magazines constantly featured him on their covers. Television programs invited him on, while fans flooded the studio mailbox with letters. In 1975, at just 14, Carter released his debut album Young and in Love, with the title track reaching the top 40 on the R&B charts. He performed it on Soul Train, the most iconic black music program of the era, and audiences erupted at the sight of a sitcom kid singing live with the charisma of a professional artist. Beyond recording, Carter was invited to perform at major events, from community concerts to special television programs. The numbers at the time were impressive. Good Times drew tens of millions of viewers each week, while Carter's album sold tens of thousands of copies. A significant feat for a teenage newcomer in music. But every spotlight has a dark side. Fame came too soon, and with it came enormous pressure. On the streets, he was constantly recognized and asked for autographs. At school, Carter could hardly live like a normal teenager. He became a symbol but lost part of his private youth. Behind the smile on screen was a relentless schedule, filming sitcoms by day, recording songs at night, and rushing to TV appearances on weekends. Still in the memory of audiences, Ralph Carter of the Good Times era remains the brightest symbol. They remember Michael's eyes lighting up in debates about social injustice, the pure voice ringing out on Soul Train, and a teen idol who was different, both deep and gifted. This period cemented Carter's place in American television history as one of the first young black faces to become a national star. And it was from that very peak that the later tragedy would cut sharper. When Good Times ended in 1979, Ralph Carter was only 18. From the dazzling spotlight, he suddenly fell into shadow, where the rumors began to follow him: marriage, family, and a quiet life. Right after Good Times ended, Carter sought balance by stepping into family life. In 1982, he met Lisa Parks, a simple woman outside the entertainment industry. Their relationship lasted a few years before they married in February 1987. The wedding was quiet, modest, and almost entirely absent from the press. Yet that very discretion fueled speculation. Was Carter hiding his love life because of some secret? In truth, it was simply his way of protecting a private home away from the media's invasive gaze. 2 years later, Carter and Lisa welcomed their first child, a son named Michael, 1988. The choice was hardly random. It was the same name as Michael Evans, the character that defined Carter's teen career. A year later, they had their second son, James, 1989, coincidentally the name of the Evans family father in Good Times. Many fans believed Carter had cleverly woven both past and present into his children's names as a way of honoring the legacy of his career. But the first marriage did not last. After 5 years together, Carter and Lisa divorced in 1992. The reason was never disclosed. Once again, tabloids pounced, spinning countless theories, from family disputes to sexuality secrets. Close friends, however, insisted it was nothing more than the usual cracks in marriage, not nearly as dramatic as the gossip suggested. 2 years later, Carter found happiness again. He met River York, a private woman who avoided public appearances. They got engaged on December 2, 1994, and married less than 3 weeks later on December 20th. A swift, quiet wedding with no fanfare. Soon after, 3 children followed: Phoenix 1995, Jessica 1997, and Vivica 1999. Thus, Carter became the father of 5, 3 sons, 2 daughters, spanning across the 1980s and 1990s. What was striking was that Carter never flaunted his private life. He didn't bring his wife and children onto red carpets, never showcased family photos in the media. Even as social media boomed, Carter stayed far away. To the public, this silence was again twisted negatively. He must be hiding something. But in reality, Carter simply wanted an ordinary life, being a husband, a father, raising his children without the glare of the spotlight. Because of this, Carter's life drifted further from public view. In rare interviews, it was revealed that his family settled in New York, choosing peace over glamour. His children grew up almost entirely outside media scrutiny. There were no headlines about rebellious celebrity kids, no scandals surrounding his marriages. Ralph Carter seemed to succeed in shielding his family from the pitfalls that so many other child stars encountered. Ironically, it was this very privacy that made Carter seem more mysterious to old fans. When they couldn't see him on screen, read about him in the papers, or find him online, curiosity automatically wove darker narratives. His quiet domestic life was draped with imaginary drama that he never actually lived. So what was the truth? Ralph Carter went through 2 marriages, raised 5 children, and maintained a stable life in New York. He never collapsed under scandal, never succumbed to addiction, never went bankrupt like many other former child stars. On the contrary, he chose the less traveled path, stepping away from fame to protect the peace of his household. On rare occasions, Carter still showed pride when speaking of family. At Good Times reunions in the 2000s, he appeared smiling with relief, but never brought his wife or children. For him, family was an inviolable territory. And paradoxically, that was exactly what fueled public fascination about what might lie behind those closed doors. Today, when people search for information about Ralph Carter, they find only brief mentions, nostalgic articles, or the occasional reunion photo with the Good Times cast. Nothing more. But that very absence has turned him into a living legend, not because of display, but because of an unsettling silence. The Ralph Carter of today has nothing left to prove. He doesn't need to chase past glory nor explain the rumors that once surrounded him. The simple truth is, this Ralph Carter is living a peaceful life in New York, far from social media, while the legacy of Michael Evans remains intact in the memory of popular culture. If you find this story fascinating, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our next videos. We'll continue to bring you more secrets about the stars who once made history, the stories behind the spotlight that you've surely never heard before. And what about you? Which detail in Ralph Carter's life surprised you the most? Leave a comment below. We'll pick out the most interesting thoughts to feature in our next video.
All data, analysis, and commentary in this video are presented based on information available at the time of production. The content is subject to change over time and should not be considered a definitive forecast. There is still so much more to explore: stories of resilience, legacy, and truth. Feel free to dive into some of our top recommended videos now appearing on your screen.